What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Joe Patrick on football. If you're wondering where I've been, you should see my roller coaster park. I'm just kidding. If you know that joke, then you've been plugged into Falcons media, I guess. And it refers to Bijan Robinson. I'll just leave it at that. But welcome back. We've been gone for a little bit, but just back in time enough to preview the Falcons against the Bills. That happens tonight. Big time Monday night football game. It's kind of the reason I'm dressed up. But anyway, it's going to be an exciting night at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Don't even know. I should have researched when's the last time they actually hosted a Monday night football game. Obviously, they hosted a Sunday night football game last year against the Chiefs. And obviously a nationally prime televised game at night on the Thursday night game, but I believe it's been a while since a Monday night football game has come to Atlanta, and Atlanta played in a Monday night football game last year against the Eagles, which they won, by the way. It's kind of funny. They won last year against the Eagles. They nearly beat the Chiefs. They had some of these impressive wins, and then they had these terrible losses. But I think it's worth pointing that out before we get into the preview, to just say that I think the Falcons have every chance to win this game. There are some people who would just kind of chalk up the Bills for the win. The Bills are 3.5-point favorites going into tonight, but I mean, even a 3.5-point spread is not that big. Yes, it would mean the Bills would be pretty heavy favorites if they were playing at home, but I think the Falcons, frankly, are by odds makers. That odds makers don't know what to do with the Falcons right now, given that they've been kind of up and down. Have a 2-2 record, obviously, at this point, coming off the bye, and then obviously have that really weird result in there, that 30-0 against the Panthers, which kind of just throws off a lot of probably the way that they make numbers that is based off of metrics and statistics and things like that. So, anyways, I'd say all that to say that I think the Falcons have a great shot to win this game. When you're coming off a bye and playing anybody, you kind of expect yourself to be in the better condition as a team coming into it, obviously having gotten a week of rest. I think there is another side to that knife, which is that you can be maybe a little bit rusty, maybe lose a little bit of your competitive edge, but I do think that it's so early in the season for the Falcons, and the fact that they've already had that one slip up where they did not have their competitive edge with them, that was relatively recently, and certainly is still at the forefront of so many of their memories. I don't expect that to be the case for this team. I would expect them to come out in this game. Again, I don't know how sharp they'll look, but I know that they will come out with the kind of competitive fire that they'll need to keep this thing competitive, and I think it will be a very good game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium tonight. And let's break the game down kind of from both sides of the football. I'm not going to talk a lot about the special teams here, because we just all know that for the Falcons, that's got to improve in a drastic way. And normally we start with the offense because it's a little bit more interesting, but obviously when you are facing the likes of Josh Allen, a quarterback that could very likely win the MVP this year. I don't know if he's leading the MVP race right now or not, but that's obviously going to be of paramount importance if the Falcons are to win this football game. So we'll start there in terms of like what they need to do against this Bills offense and against Josh Allen to, not stop them. You can never go into that kind of game against that kind of talent and think that you're just going to kind of shut them down. But I do think that they can potentially limit them if they can, frankly, do a lot of what the Patriots were able to do against the Bills last Sunday night. And that was talked about by several of the players and coaches this week. And I think like the main takeaway for me, and this kind of comes from in soccer, there's this term of, because I cover soccer, if anybody here doesn't know, of like you give your opponents too much respect. Like you go to play a big opponent and you respect them too much. It's not to say that you don't like have respect, obviously, for their quality or their ability, but there's a point where you go in with so much of a defensive focus that all you're kind of concerned about is everything but the opponent in front of you, and then the opponent beats you because you are so preoccupied with so many other things, and you're just giving them too much respect and not just believing in yourself, basically, to go out there and be able to make the plays that you have to make to win the game. And I think for the Falcons, that was the takeaway that I had listening to these guys this week was, we've got to go out there and we've got to, stand up in man coverage, like, for example, which is what the Patriots did. I believe Caden Ellis was harping about this. And he said he was talking to his brother who plays for the Patriots about what they did. But it wasn't anything super, complicated. And this Falcons defense so far this season hasn't been super complicated. They've got to go out there and be able to guard guys one-on-one on the outside. And if you can do that, then it's going to give you a lot of advantages, or at least some of the edges that you really need to have against a quarterback like Josh Allen. Because one of the other things they've been saying all week long is, you got to play 2 plays every play. There's the first play, and then there's the second play that happens during the course of every single play, especially obviously on dropbacks for Josh Allen, where he has the opportunity to either run or just even move out of the pocket, change the launch point, or find checkdowns and things. And the Bills have some slippery guys in the checkdowns game, whether that is any number of their tight ends or obviously James Cook, who can really do damage when they get the ball in their hands on some of those opportunities. So it's going to help the Falcons this week that they get A.J. Terrell back. He practiced this week. He talked to media. He said he's feeling 100%, feeling good, and that this was a game that he really, from the beginning of the season, had starred as one that he, was really excited to play in. And he was obviously saying this week that he was excited that he is healthy enough after suffering the injury in week 2 in order to be able to play in it, just because it's a big spectacle in the city, where he's from, obviously, just a really important one for AJ. So you have to think that he's not only going to be coming back into the fold, but coming back just in the nick of time with the Falcons defense, and you would think is going to be primed for, a really, really good performance. And frankly, I can't remember that many bad games by AJ Terrell, really over, starting with the beginning of last year. I thought he was pretty consistent throughout the majority of the year. He gets kind of dinged by a lot of these games against Mike Evans, and rightfully so. Mike Evans has had his fair share of success against AJ Terrell, but I feel like that hasn't even happened as of late. And when I'm thinking about, since I've been covering the team since 2022, yes, there were some games where AJ, just didn't get the breaks or just got beat, Mike Evans being one of them. There was a game in Tennessee against the Titans where the Falcons really disappointingly lost. That was part of a stretch that cost them the playoffs in 2023. And he kind of got burned on some bad calls by DeAndre Hopkins on some deep balls that really set the team back. But even that game, he was technically at fault, but I don't really feel like he was doing much wrong. And I feel really confident in his ability to, lock up a receiver. And it'll be interesting to see if they do have these corners traveling with certain guys, or whether they kind of keep them to their respective sides. Because I do think that it would make sense for the Falcons to have AJ Terrell travel with Keon Coleman, just given the size profile. Again, I feel like it's something that would have happened against the Carolina Panthers with a wide receiver like Tet McMillan, these big-bodied guys. I think A.J. Terrell could lock down Keon Coleman. Josh Allen's going to go wherever he needs to with the football. That's the right play. That's something that we heard Jeff Ulbrich say this week, and I was on the radio with the Bills, a Bills broadcast earlier this week, and they made that point too. And it's very clear that that's what makes him such a special quarterback, because he's so frustrating because he just gets the ball to wherever it's supposed to go. But it does seem like a lot of the first reads, or a lot of the initial reads, especially down in the red zone, are for Keon Coleman. And I think A.J. Terrell could really lock him down, because A.J. Terrell has the size to be able to match up with big receivers like Keon Coleman. But Keon Coleman is not like Mike Evans in having this very nuanced route running ability and this ability to beat you for speed deep, even though I've back AJ to even run with those types of receivers. I just think that he could absolutely lock down Keon Coleman, and then I think that leaves you on the other side with some fine matchups, or matchups that you're willing to take with guys like Mike Hughes and Billy Bowman, assuming he's able to play in this one, which I believe he will be. That should play in the Falcons' favor. And then the other thing, the really important part of standing up in man coverage and being able to lock some of these guys down one-on-one is that gives you the ability, one, to spy, because the Falcons will undoubtedly be spying Josh Allen, and it allows you to commit to stopping James Cook in the running game. And so much of what the Bills want to do offensively really runs through similarly to the Falcons, like in order to, you want to get Bijan going and then kind of play off that. Obviously, Josh Allen's good enough where he can carry the team, but when he's most dangerous is when James Cook is also a threat. And you need extra players, extra bodies to bring down James Cook because he is so slippery in the hole. He's very similar, in my opinion, to Bijan Robinson in that respect. So will be very interesting. And last thing I want to say, I guess one other thing that the Falcons will kind of have to be ready for is the diversity of personnel packages and pre-snap motions that the Bills are going to bring in this one. I saw Will McFadden pointed this out, but I noticed it too, which is that the Bills will do some like really weird stuff with alignments, like lining James Cook. Like, I don't even know what position you would call it. It's like running back depth in a shotgun formation, but split out like 10 yards to the right of the quarterback. It's a weird spot, but the Falcons have done that exact thing with Bijan Robinson as well, and that's what Will was pointing out on one of those posts on X earlier this week. They'll also do a lot of that kind of orbit motion stuff that Zac Robinson likes to do. Honestly, I think the Falcons will be decently prepped for it because it feels to me like Zac Robinson likes to do some of these things that Joe Brady is doing in New England, or I'm sorry, in Buffalo, maybe with a little different spin on it, of course, with Zach really preferring pistol alignments and things. But conceptually, with the pre-snap motions, I think that they do a lot of similar things. I think the biggest difference with this Bills team is that personnel lineup, where the Bills radio guy was telling me they'll even come out in 13 personnel. Like they will really kind of go super, super heavy against you. And they have so many different options, even though like you would think in 13 personnel, okay, well, how many of those tight ends can actually catch the ball? Well, the Bills tight ends can catch the ball, but also you just have that extra dynamic of Josh Allen, so that if you are going to like go heavy and go into it, you can do obviously run behind those three tight ends, but then you can also kind of play action out of it. You can do naked boots out of that with Josh Allen. You can do so many different things. So, Falcons have to make sure they're prepared for that. And the last thing I'll say about this is that before the season, I was saying that like weeks 4 and 6 for the Falcons, we're now obviously in week 6, we're going to kind of be litmus tests for this defense and how they were built. Now, at the time, I would never have expected that the Falcons would be like number 1 in overall defense based on total yardage. I think they're like top 5 in DVOA. I know they were top 2, I believe, like going into last week. I haven't checked it or heard what they are since then, but Falcons are obviously ranking extremely highly on the defensive side of the football, which I would not have anticipated to this point. But my point going into the season was that they had to revamp this defense with different profiles of players in order to be able to compete against this kind of new, modern, mobile quarterback that the NFL opposes you with by the likes of Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or Jaden Daniels or Jackson Dart. There's a wide range of overall quality of these quarterbacks, but what we're seeing is that you just like your quarterback has the ability to run is becoming, just so much more prolific in the NFL game that you've got to be able to defend that. And so I think that that's one of the reasons why we saw the team go out and get a linebacker like a Divine Diablo, going away from a Nate Landman style linebacker, for example, getting really athletic on the edges with James Pierce Jr. and Jalen Walker, as opposed to a Calais Campbell or a Zach Harrison, frankly, on the edge. Now, it helps to have some of those types of players when teams get into these heavy sets, but I think the Falcons are much better equipped to deal with those kinds of quarterbacks. I said that weeks 4 and 6 were going to be litmus tests because you were going against Jaden Daniels in week 4 and then Josh Allen in week 6. Now, what ultimately ended up happening was Jaden Daniels got hurt, so they faced Marcus Mariota, who doesn't really present the same kind of rushing threat that Jaden Daniels does at this point. But, I think that this game, therefore, will be a huge litmus test to see how well they're able to deal with this Bills offense. Because really the previous evidence that we had, at least in kind of the quote-unquote Michael Penix era, was that game against the Commanders in that Week 17 matchup. And they just couldn't get Washington off the field enough in order to win that football game like I think they feel like they should have. And that winning that football game could have really changed the trajectory of this franchise and where we are right now. And that game would have put them in pole position to make the playoffs, and then they would have had to have obviously gone and beaten the Panthers, a game that they lost. But, I think that game very well would have played out differently had they kind of been sitting in position to make the playoffs had they won it. So it'll be interesting to see. I think it'll be kind of it'll tell us a lot about kind of where this defense is and how far they need to go. And I think that I've had some skepticism as to whether this Falcons defense is actually as good as some of the statistics indicate. Certainly, some of the overall statistics. If they're able to play Josh Allen really well in this game, I think that we can then safely say the Falcons have, like a top 10 defense or something like that, something along those lines, which is crazy. And I think that should elevate everyone's preconceptions of what this Falcons team could be, because the formula for this Falcons team previously was to have a top 10 offense. And like you were hoping to get that and then get a league average defense. And that was going to be the formula to make the playoffs. If the defense is that much better, that doesn't limit the offense. We still think, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, I still think this offense can be top 10 in terms of, what they're able to be on any given week. So, pretty exciting, I think. But, again, tonight will tell us a lot about really how tested, battle-tested, and how much quality this defense actually has. All right, I have a little bit less to say about the Falcons on offense going into this one. I think it's a little bit, I don't know if simpler is the right way to phrase it, but I guess it's a little bit more straightforward. And like some of it is going to be unsaid. Like obviously you need Michael Penix to be sharp. You need him to hit the wide open receivers when they're open. I think that quote might carry with him for a while, but yeah, you obviously need some of that. But the Falcons are going into this game without Darnell Mooney, which I think that's I was going to say a big, I don't know if it's a problem, but it certainly limits them in some ways. And I think it's going to kind of force Zac Robinson's hands in some ways as to, how he schemes it up this week in order for them to build on what they were doing against the Commanders in Week 4. And that's really where I want to expand a little bit. If you remember back to last time we had a podcast, which was a couple weeks ago, I may have been actually the last episode that we did was talking about the offensive versatility that was on display in that Commanders game. I was really impressed with Zac Robinson, and not just Zac, but the way that he's got his players capable of carrying out what he wants, which is to really start to utilize Bijan Robinson as more than a running back. We saw him split out and catching passes, running wide receiver slot routes from that position. We are seeing Kyle X split out into an X role oftentimes. That seems to be where they want to use him, which is interesting because Raheem Morris has talked about what they want from their X is like the primary thing is separation, which I don't know if that's Kyle's greatest attribute, but he is certainly showing a much better ability to separate so far this year, although the Commanders were giving some cover three zone coverage looks, which I think they were really able to exploit. It wasn't like a man coverage situation, but they did show, like against the Vikings, an ability to hit Kyle Pitts when he's split out in that X roll on some quick slants and things like that went for good yardage and can certainly be a threat to the Bills in a game like this. But I think where Zac Robinson has an opportunity to really expand is in this kind of versatility. Again, let's think about the personnel package that would theoretically be presented to the Bills, which is like a 12 personnel set. That would bring out the Bills' base defense. They're 4-3 or 3-4. I don't even know what they run. I think it's a 4-3. By the way, they're going to be without Matt Milano this week, which is a huge part of their defense. Not the best run stopper, at least by PFF standards, but certainly a veteran, a really great communicator that could really be used when the Falcons do something like come out in that 12 personnel set with Charlie Warner next to Michael Penix in shotgun as basically his personal pass protector. And then you've got Bijan Robinson split out to the left in, let's call it a bunch set, just because that's something they did against the Commanders. They came out with Charlie Warner again, in this position, then a bunch set to the left that consisted of Drake London, Darnell Mooney, and Bijan Robinson, and Kyle Pitts split out to the right. And you're presenting that against a base personnel look. That is difficult for that defense to, one, kind of figure out even just how to align themselves pre-snap, and then how they're communicating what they're supposed to do against that. But I think that alignment, and obviously they're not going to have Darnell Mooney, but insert Casey Washington or whoever's going to play for Darnell Mooney. And I think that they can build on that kind of concept, and especially with regards to pre-snap motions, and especially with Bijan Robinson. Now, this is a lot on Bijan. Again, when you're a player that is as multifaceted as he is, it's kind of like you're a victim of your own success and attributes, where the coach is going to want to use you as much as possible and get the most out of you, which means there could be a lot for him to digest mentally in this game, or even during the course of a play or a pre-snap. But you could come out in that bunch look in a base person against base personnel in a 12 personnel set, and then orbit motion Bijan Robinson back into behind Penix into what is essentially a pistol look, with Charlie Warner as the fullback in the pistol, or the H-back, whatever you want to call him. But the point is that they've already shown that kind of look before. For example, against the Minnesota Vikings, they were using it a lot. Used a lot of 12 personnel. Did not have Darnell Mooney in that game, by the way, and were able to really utilize Charlie Warner as an H-back or a fullback, the way that Kyle Shanahan would like to use Kyle Juszczyk and that kind of chess piece. And so not only can Bijan Robinson run, a little zig route or, whatever, a little rail route from that slot receiver role in the bunch, but he could then motion back and you're back into your pistol look. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors the Falcons could throw at the Bills with this respect. Who knows? Maybe you could do the orbit motion, get Bijan Robinson back into that pistol look after having been in a bunch, and then you could fake the handoff to Bijan Robinson. It's called a play action pass, and then throw the ball. I'm just kidding. I shouldn't be that childish about it, because Zac Robinson has undoubtedly forgotten more about football than I have ever learned and will ever learn. But would like to see them utilize the play action a little bit. And by the way, to that point, he said this week that they've not been good enough at that. They have not exploited it as much as they probably would have liked to this point in the season, and they need to improve. That's an area of improvement for the team. So I don't think that this is some ideological thing, that they just don't like play action, or that they don't believe that Michael Penix can execute play action. I just think that, I don't know. Well, it's clear it is a point of focus for them, and we'll see if this is the week where it kind of comes to fruition, where they are able to exploit it a little bit more. I mean, we saw them improve in that respect against Washington. Kyle Pitts caught a touchdown pass off a play action pass. So we'll see. But definitely would like to see them build more out of that just concept of being versatile and having these different pieces in different roles. Kyle Pitts plays a role in this as well, in terms of being able to split out and be the X receiver on the other side, which just stretches that corner out and just stretches the field a little bit. Can you do different things with him? Probably not in motion, but because you want to get Drake London in plenty of motions as well. But I think that there's just a lot of different concepts. I was just kind of presenting an example of how they could build off of something that they showed against the Commanders. And then, to that point, the other key for this team is obviously, you got to run the football. You got to stop the run the football. But the Bills are a team that you can run against, and it's going to be important for the Falcons to do that this week, because not only is it a strength of yours, and you believe that you should be able to run the ball against pretty much anybody, this Falcons team, despite not having Caleb McGarry, Elijah Wilkinson has done yeoman's work. And you obviously have two backs who are, exceptional. But, this Bills defense is there for the taking. They're 28th in run defense grade by PFF. Now, you can argue with grades, and I certainly wouldn't just take that to the bank. But, they're 20th in ESPN's metrics and run stop rate. They're just not a great run defense team. Again, they're missing Matt Milano. Not necessarily a run stopper, but if you get them in big personnel packages, you just force more of their reserve linebackers to come out and have to play. And, I think Bijan licks his chops against, practice squad elevated linebackers or just reserve linebackers and an ability to make them miss if they can get him the ball in space. So that's going to be really important. Then the other thing that it does, the run game, if you can get it going, is it's going to help you on the other side of the football. Everything that we talked about at the front half of the show, shortening the game, not giving Josh Allen so many opportunities. You do not want to be getting off the field quick and then have Josh Allen come right back on the field, able to lead his offense. You want to keep them on the sideline as much as possible. So the Falcons would do very well to have a bunch of long drives, and then those drives, again, to go with the kind of cliche keys to the game or whatever, but you got to score touchdowns. You don't want to be relying on Parker Romo in this kind of game. Frankly, like, you're on Monday Night Football. You want to be, make it a spectacle. Have all your star players be scoring touchdowns. That's what we all want to see. Obviously, that's what the TV broadcast wants to see. It's what everybody except for the Bills want to see. So, yeah, that would be great if they could end them with touchdowns. But ultimately, you just want to limit how much you give the ball to Josh Allen and this Bills offense. So with that said, we'll get out of here. Huge game tonight. You can catch us on the radio at 92.9 The Game. We will be starting our broadcast. I'm trying to do the math in my head. You can catch me on 92.9 from 3 to 5 on the Wade Ford Tailgate Show. You would think I would know ahead of time what time I'm supposed to be on, but I'm literally doing math to figure it out. 3 to 5 on 92.9 The Game. That's the Wade Ford Tailgate Show. We lead into the pregame show with Mike Johnson, Bo Morgan, Grant McCauley will have you at halftime along with Mike Johnson, and then those two in the postgame as well, and then Chris Thomas on the Falcons flyover. None of which outdo Wes Durham and Dave Archer on the call for the Falcons versus the Bills. Monday Night Football. It's an earlier start on this Monday night, so make sure you make plans to get home from work in traffic in time. I believe that kickoff's going to be around 7:15. I know on TV they're advertising it at 7 p.m., but should be about 7:15-ish, I believe, is when kickoff will happen. So hope to see a lot of you there at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Should be a great crowd. Should be an exciting night, and we'll see what happens. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time. We'll catch you after the game, actually.